Congress should be focused on every single day, working together to create jobs, to grow the economy, and to strengthen the middle class, not partisan games that distract us from the real challenges that our countries face. Thank you very much. And now I'm delighted to introduce my colleague from California. Time for the West Coast. Linda Sanchez.
5 and Rule 18, the Chair declares the House and the Committee of the Whole House and the State of the Union for consideration of H.R. 1582. The gentleman from Nebraska, Mr. Fortenberry, will kindly resume the chair.
The House is in the Committee of the Whole House on the State of the Union for further consideration of H.R. 1582, which the clerk will report by title.
A bill to protect consumers by prohibiting the administrator of the Environmental Protection Agency from promulgating as final certain energy-related rules that are estimated to cost more than $1 billion and will cause significant adverse effects to the economy.
When the Committee of the Whole House rose earlier today, a request for a recorded vote on Amendment Number 6, printed in Part B of House Report 113-174, offered by the gentleman from Pennsylvania, Mr. Murphy, had been postponed. Pursuant to Clause 6 of Rule 18, proceedings will now resume on those amendments printed in Part B of House Report 113-174, on which further proceedings were postponed, in the following order. Amendment Number 1 by Mr. Waxman of California. Amendment Number 3 by Mr. Connolly of Virginia. Amendment Number 6 by Mr. Murphy of Pennsylvania. The Chair will reduce to 2 minutes the time for any electronic vote after the first vote in this series. The unfinished business is the request for a recorded vote on Amendment Number 1, printed in Part B of House Report 113-174 by the gentleman from California, Mr. Waxman, on which further proceedings were postponed and on which the noes prevailed by voice vote. The clerk will redesignate the amendment.
Amendment Number 1, printed in Part B of House Report Number 113-174, offered by Mr. Waxman of California.
A recorded vote has been requested. Those in support of the request for a recorded vote will rise and be counted. A sufficient number having arisen, a recorded vote is ordered. Members will record their votes by electronic device. This will be a 15-minute vote.
The House gavels back in after a brief recess to complete consideration of a bill that would place limits on the Environmental Protection Agency from finalizing regulations that are estimated to cost more than $1 billion. 3 amendment votes here, then a Democratic motion to recommit, and final passage vote after that. This first amendment, Henry Waxman, Democrat of California, with an amendment that would prohibit the EPA from making a final energy-related rule that's estimated to cost more than $1 billion if the Energy Department determines the rule causes significant adverse effects to the economy. This is a 15-minute vote. The following 2 amendment votes will be 2-minute votes. Yesterday, the House Republican leadership pulled from the floor the 2014 spending bill for transportation and housing over concern on having enough votes to get the bill through. Today in the Senate failed to move forward on their version, their $54 billion version of the Transportation and HUD bill. The vote was 54 to 43. They needed 60 to move forward to final passage. In his briefing today, House Speaker John Boehner told reporters that it was clear that appropriations bills for 2014 would not be completed by September 30th, the end of the fiscal year, and the Speaker suggested a short-term continuing resolution, or CR, would be in the nation's best interest. We'll show you the Speaker's briefing as this vote continues.
Morning, everyone. Yesterday, I met with the House chairmen that are leading the investigation on Benghazi. The chairmen have been doing good work, much of it behind the scenes. But I stressed once again to them that we need to get to the bottom of what happened that terrible night, why it happened, and how we can prevent similar tragedies in the future. We're also continuing to investigate the IRS for its abuse of power. And there's nothing phony about these scandals, Mr. President. Not when 4 Americans are dead, and not when the agency enforcing your health care law has been harassing Americans because of their political beliefs. The American people deserve answers, and we're going to continue to fight for the truth, no matter how badly the administration wants to sweep these issues under the carpet. Also this week, we learned that our economy continues to muddle along at an unacceptable pace. This is yet another reminder that under President Obama's leadership, our country has fallen into a new normal: slow growth, high unemployment, stagnant wages. It's bad enough that he continues to block the Keystone Pipeline, which his own administration says would mean tens of thousands of new jobs. This week, he actually mocked the project and the jobs that it would create. I don't know how he can look Americans in the eye who are struggling and think there's anything to joke about. President Obama's economy is no laughing matter. That's why House Republicans continue to work on our plan for economic growth and real jobs in our country. Looking forward, Washington must confront some serious choices that we're going to deal with this fall. President Obama and his party in the House and Senate are in denial about Washington's spending problem. They haven't come to terms with the fact that unless we deal with the spending problem honestly and forthrightly, our kids and grandkids are going to face a much dimmer future. We won't have prosperity unless we address these massive deficits and debt that are hurting our economy and jeopardizing the American dream. Our members are ready to solve this problem. We've shown leadership. We've passed a balanced budget. The question is, does the President have the courage to stand up to his own party and work with us to truly solve this problem? I hope so.
Speaking of the budget, yesterday there were problems with the FUD bill, and Mr. Rogers said that that showed that Republicans are basically turning their back on the discretionary levels in the Ryan budget. What's your reaction to his statement?
I believe that the votes would have been there for the T-HUD bill, but we had some 50 amendments yet to consider on that bill, and considering everything else that we've got going on this week, decided that dealing with finishing that bill in September was the right step at this moment. But I have full confidence that the votes would have been there to pass that bill.
We'll take it up in September?
Yes.
Mr. Speaker, there's been some talk about Lois Lerner in the IRS and how she may have, there's some documents that she may have colluded with FEC officials. We've heard a lot of criticism about the IRS, specifically her here. Can you elaborate on that in particular, or and to those who are naysayers, what do you say about this? Can you lay out some of these?
Well, there is some evidence that she worked with the FEC. It should be noted, as I recall, she used to work at the FEC and would clearly have some relationships with the people that she worked with over there. But I think our committees are continuing to work to get to the bottom of this, and I'll let the facts speak for themselves.
Mr. Speaker, what's your thoughts about Senator John McCain and a few other Senate Republicans going to the White House to talk about trying to get a grand bargain?
I welcome all the conversations that we can have. We all know what the problem is.
Are they keeping you in the loop? Are they telling you what they're talking about?
I'm well aware of what they're talking about, and I've made clear. We have a spending problem. We have to deal with the spending problem that we have. Dana.
Edward Snowden has left the Moscow airport. Senator McCain has put out a statement saying that it's a slap in the face to America. It's time to fundamentally rethink our relationship with Putin's Russia. What do you think?
Mr. Snowden's actions have hurt the ability of our country to protect our citizens. And I would hope that President Obama would engage President Putin on this issue and resolve it in a way that's satisfactory to the American people.
Can you be more specific and engage in what way? I mean, how
I'll let him decide. I'll let him decide the best way to engage the president.
Ways and Means Committee Chair Dave Camp told his committee members yesterday he wants to do a markup of the tax reform bill in late October before the debt ceiling becomes an issue. Can you talk about how tax reform might fit into the House schedule this year and whether there might be an interest in tying it to a debt ceiling bill?
We'll see.
Mr. Speaker, on fiscal 14 appropriations generally, given the rate of progress in both chambers on those bills, what's the likelihood of a CR, and
how long might that go if that's the way things progress?
Well, it's clear that we're not going to have the appropriation bills finished by September 30th. I believe a continuing resolution for some short period of time would probably be in the nation's interest. But having said that, the idea of operating for an entire year under a CR is not a good way to do business. And I've been working with Chairman Rogers to try to find a way to actually do all of these appropriation bills. I think it's important for Congress to do its work. Yes.
Thanks, Mr. Speaker. Can we go back to that statement from Chairman Rogers yesterday? He seemed pretty clear that this was a rejection of both the Ryan budget levels and the sequestration.
I met with the chairman yesterday and his committee. Listen, the appropriators, they've had a tough job over the last couple of years. And they've taken a lot of tough votes in their committee. And so I understand the frustration that they're dealing with. But I just want to make clear, the sequestration is going to remain in effect until the President agrees to cuts and reforms that will allow us to remove it. The President insisted on the sequester. None of us want it. None of us like it. There are smarter ways to cut spending. The House has moved twice over the last year and a half to replace the sequester. We saw no action in the United States Senate. So if they want the sequester to go, we're going to have to get serious about our long-term spending problem. Jill?
The perception, despite what is real, is between pulling the transportation bill yesterday, the failed farm bill vote, and Cantor's health care bill that also had to be pulled from the floor earlier this year, that Republican leadership has lost control of the floor for their conference. And Mr. Hoyer just said that the conference is clearly very divided.
I've made it very clear that I didn't believe every bill that came to the floor had to pass. I believe in allowing the House to work its will. I think that's the way the founders intended the House to work. More members are participating in what's happening on the floor than we've seen in a long time. And so I'm not the least bit concerned about what some might want to describe as perception.
But doesn't it make it more difficult if you can't, on some of these smaller bills, if you can't unify the conference? Doesn't it make it more difficult for the fights in the fall on debt limit and keeping the government open?
We'll take this one step at a time, and I'm sure the August recess will have our members in a better mood when they come back. David?
Thank you, sir. The CR that you just referred to, will it defund Obamacare?
No decisions have been made on how we're going to proceed with the CR.
Mr. Speaker?
Rick.
Oh, me? What would you say to these appropriators? I mean, after pulling this bill in favor of these government reform bills that also happen to dovetail with your August messaging, I mean, there's a real sense of frustration among these guys, I think. What was your message to them?
Well, the message is we're going to continue to work with them. They've got a tough job, and I certainly recognize the tough job that we, the conference, have given them. And they've done very good work. And so it's just, you know, it's August. The members been at it for a while. And, you know, members around here, we got 435 people trying to come to an agreement. Sometimes they get a bit frustrated. They got a little frustrated yesterday.
Yesterday you said that the House would have ample time to address some of these fiscal issues that are outstanding. The Democratic whip was just standing here about an hour ago, and he warned that this time can go by in a blink of an eye, and he thinks it's a huge deal that you're going on a 5-week recess. What do you say to your critics that are not pleased with leaving 5 weeks and going back to districts?
Well, there's ample time to get our work done.
Mr. Speaker.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Speaker Boehner from earlier today on the floor, the first of 3 amendment votes to the bill dealing with EPA regulations. In his comments, the Speaker had a number of questions about the transportation bill, which was pulled off the floor of the House yesterday, and in the Senate today was blocked by Republicans in a cloture vote, 54 to 43. They needed 60 to move forward. Susan Collins of Maine, the only Republican voting with Democrats in that cloture vote. The Hill writes that if the Senate had passed the transportation bill, which funds government transportation and housing agencies, it would have given Democrats a clear upper hand heading into a government showdown in the fall. They also write that House Republicans balked at spending cuts and House leaders had to cancel a vote on their transport bill on Wednesday afternoon. As this vote continues here on the House floor, we're going to bring you some reaction to the vote earlier in the Senate, as we just mentioned, on the cloture vote on transportation. First up, Senate Democratic leaders and their reaction.
Okay, everyone. Okay, we're going to get started here. Come on in, real people.
You're the real.
We've heard the hue and cry for a couple of years now about regular order. I would hope those people that have asked for regular order would refer to the Constitution, which says, no money shall be drawn from the Treasury but in consequence of appropriations made by law. It's hard to find a more basic duty of the Congress than to pass appropriation bills. And to pass an appropriation bill, we have to start the process. The Senate needs to act, the House needs to act. We need to work something out in conference. We chose the transportation bill because it is a matter for which there has been broad bipartisan support. The committee reported the measure with 6 Republican senators joining all the Democratic senators. It's hard to find a matter that's more basic and there's more agreement than we need to have safe highways and safe bridges. We have 70,000 bridges that don't meet the standards of the code. 70,000, not 7,000. And as Senator Murray has said, I've heard Senator Collins say it, you know, those bridges are not Democratic bridges. They're not Republican bridges. They're our bridges. So what's happening out on the floor as we speak is terribly, terribly disappointing. GOP fiscal splits erupt. Rogers rips leadership. Rogers, of course, is the chairman of the Appropriations Committee. The House has made a choice, sequestration, and he said it's unrealistic and it's ill-conceived. They must be brought to an end. That's what he said. Finally, we have someone speaking out within the Republican caucus in the House about how dysfunctional they are. We've had a few breakthroughs here in the Senate in the last few weeks, for which I'm very grateful. There are a number of senators who have broken away here who are trying to do the right thing. So, Chairman Bernanke, appointed by a Republican president who has served Republicans and Democrats now valiantly, respectfully, and with great recognition of the good job that he's done. He has said, as early as this week, as late as this week I should say, sequestration is hurting our economy by at least a percentage point. I mean, how much more do they need to hear? Now, my friend, the Republican leaders down on the floor, weighing against regular order, which he's called for in years past. Senator Collins, if nothing else, was shown no respect. How hard did she work with valiant Patty Murray to get this done? I can't understand why the Republican leadership over here would twist arms to derail a bipartisan bill that creates jobs all over America. We're going to go a little out of order today. Senator Murray.
Well, what happened just now is that the Senate Republicans chose gridlock over jobs. They really chose obstruction over economic growth, and they chose political games over common sense investments. The day after the House Republican Transportation and Housing Bill imploded and proved that sequestration can't even pass the Republican House, Senate Republican leadership threw a tantrum and they said it's my way or the highway, and boy does their highway have a lot of potholes. The Senate Transportation Bill is about creating jobs, investing in families and communities, and laying down a strong foundation for long-term and broad-based economic growth. It is a bipartisan bill. I worked very closely with Senator Collins to write it. 6 Republicans voted for it in committee. We had an open debate on the Senate floor, as Senator Collins said, and we had votes and we accepted amendments from both sides of the aisle. So I am extremely disappointed, and I'm angry that Republican leadership fought back against members of their own party and forced a filibuster. And I think a lot of people across the country are watching this and they're disgusted. There's people like Ron Borza, he's here with us today. Ron depends on the investments from this bill for his job. He knows that without them, not only would he be out of work, but the communities he works in will pay the price as well. Without these investments, traffic is going to be worse, our bridges are going to be less safe, our trains, our airports are going to continue to decline, our most vulnerable seniors and families and veterans are going to be less secure and could end up homeless, and the economy is going to suffer now and over the long term. That's what the Senate Republicans have voted for when they've filibustered this today. Those of us who supported this bill are going to go home to talk to our constituents about how we are fighting for jobs, bipartisan problem solving, and economic growth. And the Republicans who filibustered this, they're going to have to go home and explain to their constituents why they prefer partisanship and obstruction. I hope that the time back home that we're going to have will convince Republicans to come back to the table. Join us in a budget conference to resolve these conflicts. Help us replace this damaging sequestration and work with us to invest in jobs and the economy. That is what the country expects. That's what we ought to be fighting for.
Both Senator Durbin and Senator Schumer said it would be appropriate for the chair of the Appropriations Committee.
As soon as I get my little school fancy bag. This has been a sad 48 hours for the American people. This shows exactly why Washington is not working, why we have not lowered our unemployment rate, why we're not improving our public safety on highways and on bridges, and are failing to meet our compelling human need in housing for the elderly and the disabled and the disadvantaged. Today in the United States Senate, through strong-arm tactics, the other party was leaned on not to vote for allowing the transportation housing bill to move forward. What does that mean in plain English? They say, we're not going to vote for it because we don't agree with the overall budget that Appropriations is using. You're using $1.058 trillion, which they voted for this spring in an overwhelming vote. They say they want a new top line, but then they object to Senator Murray the chair of the Budget Committee to go into conference to be able to get a new top line. A top line comes from the Budget Committee. The Appropriations Committee does the bottom line, subcommittee by subcommittee. Now, if they want a new top line, they ought to get off their rhetoric, get off their holds, and get off of everything else, and let Murray and the Budget Committee go to conference to get that new top line. As the chair of the Appropriations Committee, I'm willing to negotiate on a compromise, but I want to do it in the regular way we do it. The Budget Committee gives us the top line, and we look at these subcommittees. I marked up my allocation as the chair based on what the Senate agreed to in an overwhelming vote this spring. So where does that leave us? It says essentially, Senator Mikulski, no matter how hard you've worked on a bipartisan basis with both sides of the aisle and both sides of the dome for a regular order, we're not going to approve one appropriations bill. Well, what is that? Are we back to gridlock? Are we back to where does that leave us? Well, I tell you, it leaves us with a higher jobless rate, not meeting compelling human need, and not meeting the needs of public safety on our highways and bridges. Senator Murray and Senator Collins in the Transportation Housing Subcommittee did an outstanding job. They put more money in inadequate infrastructure, from federal highways, capital improvement programs, new starts in transit programs, investment in rail, particularly new tracks, new equipment. And what would that mean? It would mean that we would be able to improve public safety and put people to work in construction. Roughly 61% of the jobs directly created by 61% of jobs are created by investing in infrastructure, particularly in the construction industry. You're going to hear from some of the people who work in that every day. We had a bill that would have put people to work, fixed bridges and highways, improved public safety. It would have gotten America moving. It would have gotten America working. And we should do the same. Let's lift the hold on the Budget Committee. Let's follow a regular order. And let's also try to get America moving and working again.
Good job, Rob.
First, I want to thank Senator Reid for allowing me to follow Senator Mikulski. It's quite a difficult task. Standing behind us are some men and certainly women in the building trades industry. What are they looking for? They're looking for a job. They want a paycheck to take home to their families. And they want to rebuild America so the 21st century is an American century. That's all they're asking for. It's not...
Mr. Johnson of Georgia. Mr. Johnson of Georgia votes aye. Mr. Terry. Mr. Terry votes no. Mr. Cuellar. Off aye on no. Off aye on no for Mr. Cuellar.
On this vote, the yeas are 183 and the nays are 230. The amendment is not adopted. The unfinished business is a request for a recorded vote on Amendment Number 3, printed in Part B of House Report 113-174 by the gentleman from Virginia, Mr. Connolly, on which further proceedings were postponed and on which the noes prevailed by voice vote. The clerk will redesignate the amendment.
Amendment number 3, printed in Part B of House Report number 113-174, offered by Mr. Connolly of Virginia.
A recorded vote has been requested. Those in support of the request for a recorded vote will rise and be counted. A sufficient number having risen, a recorded vote is ordered. Members will record their votes by electronic device. This will be a 2-minute vote.
The bill would restrict the Environmental Protection Agency in finalizing regulations that are estimated to cost more than $1 billion. They've had a couple of amendment votes lined up here. The second of 3 here, Jerry Connolly, Democrat of Virginia, with an amendment that prevents a section of the bill requiring the Energy Department to review EPA regulations from applying rules related to the protection of air and water quality. It's a 2-minute vote. One more 2-minute vote after this, and then final passage. Motion to recommit, and then final passage on that bill. They'll take up the rule for the vote on the rule for a bill that on the RAINS Act, what's known as the RAINS Act, requiring congressional approval of regulations, federal regulations costing more than $100 million. Over in the Senate, they are wrapping up what's likely to be their last vote before the August recess. It's a final passage vote, the vote on the confirmation of Samantha Power. She's been nominated by President Obama to be the next UN ambassador. The vote is underway. This is the Senate in session, and that's on C-SPAN 2.
this vote. These are 100.
Nebraska votes no. Ms. Waters. Ms. Waters votes aye.
Vote, the yeas are 182 and the nays are 224. The amendment is not adopted. The unfinished business is a request for a recorded vote on amendment number 6, printed in Part B of House Report 113-174 by the gentleman from Pennsylvania, Mr. Murphy, on which further proceedings were postponed and on which the ayes prevailed by voice vote. The clerk will designate the amendment.
Amendment number 6, printed in Part B of House Report number 113-174, offered by Mr. Murphy of Pennsylvania.
A recorded vote has been requested. Those in support of the request for a recorded vote will rise and be counted. A sufficient number having risen, a recorded vote is ordered. Members will record their vote by electronic device. This will be a 2-minute vote.
It's the last amendment vote on a bill dealing with EPA regulations. We expect a debate on a motion to recommit coming up next. Tim Murphy's amendment would prohibit the EPA from calculating the cost of carbon pollution when promulgating clean air rules. The House is back early tomorrow, a 9 o'clock start Friday in the U.S. House. On Capitol Hill today, 41 pro-immigrant activists were arrested outside the Capitol, blocking traffic, pushing for passage of comprehensive immigration legislation. The Associated Press says that among the activists were leaders from a range of immigration groups and unions, including the United Farm Workers and the AFL-CIO. At the Capitol at this hour, the Senate is voting on the nomination of Samantha Power to be the next UN ambassador. That vote is underway. You can follow it on C-SPAN 2. And also today, President Obama naming another nominee, choosing retired corporate and governmental official John Culberson to take over the IRS. Mr. Culberson came in to overhaul the mortgage buyer Freddie Mac near the end of its collapse in the financial crisis, near the end of the George W. Bush administration. That announcement made by the White House this afternoon, John Culberson nominated to head the IRS.
On this vote, the yeas are 235.
Mr. Grijalva. Off aye, on no for Mr. Grijalva.
On this vote, the yeas are 234. The nays are 178. The amendment is adopted. The question is on the committee amendment in the nature of a substitute as amended. Those in favor, please say aye. Those opposed, please say no. The ayes have it. The amendment is adopted. Accordingly, under the rules of the committee, under the rule, the committee rises. Mr. Speaker, the Committee of the Whole House on the State of the Union has under consideration H.R. 1582. Pursuant to House Resolution 315, I report the bill back to the House with an amendment adopted in the Committee of the Whole. The Chair of the Committee of the Whole House on the State of the Union reports that the committee has under consideration the bill H.R. 1582, and pursuant to House Resolution 315, reports the bill back to the House with an amendment adopted in the Committee of the Whole. Under the rule, the previous question is ordered, and it is a separate vote demanded on any amendment to the amendment reported from the Committee of the Whole. If not, the question is on the adoption of the committee amendment in the nature of a substitute as amendment. Those in favor will say aye. Those opposed will say no. The ayes have it. The amendment is agreed to. The question is on engrossment and third reading of the bill. Those in favor will say aye. Those opposed, no. The ayes seem to have it. Third reading.
A bill to protect consumers by prohibiting the administrator of the Environmental Protection Agency from promulgating as final certain energy-related rules that are estimated to cost more than $1 billion and will cause significant adverse effects to the economy.
The House will come to order. The House will be in order. For what purpose does the gentlewoman from California seek recognition?
Mr. Speaker, I have a motion to recommit at the desk.
Is the gentlewoman opposed to the bill?
Yes, I'm opposed.
The gentlewoman qualifies. The clerk will report the motion.
Ms. Capps of California moves to recommit the bill.
For what purpose does the gentleman from Louisiana seek recognition?
I reserve a point of order against the motion to recommit.
Points of order are reserved. Clerk will report.
Ms. Capps of California moves to recommit the bill H.R. 1582 to the Committee on Energy and Commerce with instructions to report the same back to the House forthwith with the following amendment. At the end, add the following section, Section 5, protecting the health of children and seniors. This act shall not apply with respect to rules that will result in reduced incidence of cancer, premature mortality, asthma attacks, or respiratory disease in children or seniors.
The gentlewoman from California is recognized for 5 minutes. Thereafter, an opponent. The House will come to order. The gentlewoman from California is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I rise today to offer the final amendment to the bill. And I want to be clear, passage of this amendment will not prevent passage of the underlying bill. If it's adopted, my amendment will be incorporated into the bill and the bill will immediately be voted upon. As currently written, H.R. 1582 would cripple the ability of the Environmental Protection Agency to protect the water we drink and the air we breathe. My amendment simply ensures that the EPA can continue to protect children and seniors from the harmful impacts of pollution. My friends across the aisle claim this bill is about transparency, but let's call it what it is. Just another attempt to block the EPA from doing its job. This bill makes no sense on so many levels. It's redundant and it's unnecessary. It gives the Energy Secretary unprecedented authority to veto EPA rules, and it allows for indefinite delays of EPA rulemaking. Our top priority should be the health of our children and of our families, not the bottom line of polluting energy companies. It's scary to think how many EPA protections.
Gentlelady, suspend. The House will please come to order. Gentlewoman is recognized.
It's frightening to think how many EPA protections that we now take for granted would have been delayed or derailed if this bill were law. Consider the recently finalized mercury and air toxic standards. Before these rules, there were no federal standards limiting power plant emissions of toxic pollutants like mercury and arsenic. As we know, these toxic pollutants are really poisons. They cause a variety of serious health problems in people of all ages. They affect brain development in children. They can cause serious birth defects when pregnant women are exposed. That's why EPA put restrictions on these toxic emissions. Restrictions that protect future generations and set them up for success, while also reducing preventable health care costs. If H.R. 1582 had been law, these rules could have been delayed indefinitely or not happened at all. Mr. Speaker, my friends across the aisle talk frequently about the financial costs of these and other EPA actions.
Will the House come to order? Gentlelady from California.
But what about the health care costs? Costs that all of us pay when these preventable ailments occur. And what about the human costs of inaction? Delaying the air toxic standards for just one additional year would have resulted in more than 11,000 heart attacks, more than 120,000 asthma attacks, more than 12,000 more hospital and emergency room visits, and up to 25,300 lives lost due to smog, due to soot, due to toxic air pollution, and that's just in 1 year. Mr. Speaker, people should be more important than profit. My amendment speaks to just this. It would simply shield the rules that protect the health of children and of seniors from this dangerous bill. If my colleagues are serious about protecting our children and our seniors, they should have no trouble supporting this amendment. More than anyone, children and seniors rely on the EPA to do its job protecting public health and the environment. The mercury and air toxics rules and others like it are helping children and families across the nation live healthier, longer lives. Perhaps polluters find these rules inconvenient, but the American people certainly don't. They want clean air to breathe. They want clean water to drink. And they want the peace of mind that comes from strong public health standards. My amendment ensures that protecting the health of our children and seniors never takes a backseat to the financial interests of our polluters. So I urge my colleagues to support this amendment and make sure that the health and well-being of our children and seniors always comes first. I yield back the balance of my time.
Gentlewoman yields back. For what purpose does the gentleman from Louisiana seek recognition?
Mr. Speaker, I claim the time in opposition to the motion. I withdraw my point of order.
Point of order is withdrawn. The gentleman is recognized for 5 minutes.
Yeah, this bill doesn't cripple anything. Laws that are currently on the book stay on the book. The problem is the EPA uses bad science. I say that not as a Republican, I say that as quoting other scientists. For example, a gentleman who is a former member of the Harvard School of Public Health testified that EPA's statistical approach is fraught with numerous assumptions and uncertainty. A physician from the Colorado School of Public Health said that the way that EPA uses statistics is highly misleading to public policymakers. I will make the point. You cannot be pro-family unless you're pro-environment, and you cannot be pro-environment unless you're pro-family, but you can't be either unless you first have a strong and healthy economy. Now, the Energy Consumers Relief Act simply puts a check on the billion-dollar energy rules that may hurt American families, costing American jobs. If you support transparency and good government, you should support this bill. If you support protecting American families and consumers from higher energy costs, you should support H.R. 1582. If you support having the prosperity needed for families, for environmental and health protections, you should support 1582. If you're pro-jobs, pro-economic growth, and anti-poverty, you should support H.R. 5082. I urge you to vote no on this motion to recommit. I urge you to support the Energy Consumers Relief Act, and I yield back.
The gentleman yields back. Without objection, the previous question is ordered. The question is on the motion to recommit. Those in favor will say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed will say no. No. Opinion of the chair, the noes have it.
Mr. Speaker, I ask for a recorded vote.
The gentleman from California is recognized. A recorded vote is requested. Those favoring a recorded vote will rise. A sufficient number having risen, a recorded vote is ordered. Members will record their votes by electronic device. Pursuant to Clause 8 and Clause 9 of Rule 20, this 5-minute vote on the motion to recommit will be followed by 5-minute votes on the passage of H.R. 1582, if ordered, ordering the previous question on House Resolution 322, adoption of House Resolution 322, if ordered, and the motion to suspend the rules on H.R. 1897. This is a 5-minute vote.
California Democrat Lois Capps offering a motion to recommit, a last chance to change the bill on a measure that would place limits on the EPA from finalizing regulations estimated to cost more than $1 billion. 5-minute vote here. Final passage vote is next. Over in the Senate earlier today, the Republicans in the Senate blocked efforts by the Democrats to move forward on their $54 billion transportation and housing spending bill. You may recall yesterday the House pulled that bill from the floor as well, the House version of that. After the vote in the Senate today, which was 54 to 43, they needed 60 to move forward. After the vote, Senate Republican leader Mitch McConnell said the transportation bill violated budget cap set by Congress back in 2011. Here's their briefing.
Well, good afternoon, everyone. I'm sure we'll be a lot briefer than the group that was just before you. The vote we just had is symbolically very, very significant. 2 years ago this month, on a bipartisan basis, the President signing the bill, we committed to the American people that we would reduce spending over the next 10 years by $2.1 trillion. There's no question that had cloture been invoked on this particular appropriation bill, which was even more than the President had asked for, your storyline tomorrow would have been Congress on a bipartisan basis walks away from the Budget Control Act. Look, we now have a debt the size of our economy, which makes us look a lot like Greece. There's much left to be done to get our financial house in order, but boy, you don't make any progress in that direction by signaling to the American people that you're not serious about the things you already agreed to do on a bipartisan basis. Our good friends on the other side of the aisle have been spending the entire year trying to get us to walk away from spending reductions that we committed to on a bipartisan basis just a couple of years ago. It's pretty clear that unless you tax and unless you spend, they don't have much interest. And we believe that getting the federal government's house in order financially is the single most important thing we could do, the single biggest threat to the next generation and the ones coming after it. So we think this vote is of symbolic significance going into the fall, when we will have obviously the inevitable discussion about how to fund the government. We'll be happy to take a couple of questions, and then we're going to a, believe it or not, bipartisan lunch over in the Russell Caucus building.
Democrats and others are looking at the campaign primary challenge that you have and saying that's driving your actions on a bill like this. How do you respond to that?
I'm sorry?
That your own Tea Party primary challenge in your campaign back at home is helping drive your decisions here in the Senate?
The reason for this vote, and by the way, all but one Republican voted the way I suggested, was because we need to indicate we're going to keep our word around here. This was a word made on a bipartisan basis just 2 years ago. The President signed it. It's the law. And we think it's important to convey to the American people we take our commitments seriously.
Senator Reid just said that the budget number for revenue in the Murray budget is a good place to start for tax reform. You guys seem to be so far apart on just this basic element of tax reform. How can any compromise realistically be achieved in this Congress?
Well, I honestly don't see how we get there. Back in the 80s, there was a bipartisan agreement between President Reagan and Speaker Tip O'Neill that the whole purpose of comprehensive tax reform was to make the country more competitive, not to raise revenue for the federal government. It's pretty clear now that the President's even walked away from the commitment he made to us at lunch last year that at least corporate tax reform would be revenue neutral. I think I can speak for all of my members. We think you have to do the entire code, not just corporations, because the vast majority of American businesses are pass-through corporations. In other words, they pay taxes as individuals. So, yeah, I think we're stymied. I mean, we're stymied by the desire of the majority to raise taxes again, and that's not what most people think.
Are you willing to pronounce this effort dead on arrival then?
What I'm telling you is the only reason we got anywhere in the 80s was this was a bipartisan agreement about what it was about. It was about making America more competitive, about getting the tax rates down, simplifying the code. It's not about raising revenue for the government. So, yeah, I think we have a real stumbling block here in trying to figure a way forward. I'm going to take one more.
Would you set the bill that sets spending levels at pre-sequester level? So at the Budget Control Act level, before the sequester kicks in, is that something that you'd be open to in the CR? Or would you want the lowest?
Well, I know it won't shock you to know that we didn't come here to negotiate today. We'll talk about all of this in the fall. But I think that the single message you ought to take out of this vote from Republicans is that we believe the bipartisan commitment we made a year and a half ago is important, and we ought not to be walking away from it. That's what this vote was about. Thanks, everybody.
Looking forward to Fancy Farm Center.
On this vote, the yeas are 188, the nays are 221. The motion is not adopted. The question is on the passage of the bill. Those in favor will say aye. Those opposed will say no. The ayes seem to... Gentleman from California.
On that vote, I demand a roll call.
A recorded vote is requested. Those favoring a recorded vote will rise. A sufficient number having risen, the recorded vote is ordered. Members will record their votes by electronic device. This will be a 5-minute vote.
This is the final passage vote on a bill that would limit the EPA's ability from finalizing regulations estimated to cost more than $1 billion. One more vote after this, and then the House will begin debate, 1 hour of general debate on a bill known as the RAINS Act. It would require congressional approval of any regulation costing more than $100 million of economic impact.